The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
We've reached the top of the hour, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for standing by, and welcome to today's Channel Focus webinar. Our topic today is Digital Transformation Impact on Channel Partner Performance, Total Cost of Partnering, and the Impact of Profitable Revenue. Our expert speaker today is Hanan Greenberg, Senior Vice President and General Manager of Model N. Hanan Greenberg has served in a variety of roles at Model N since 2005. He is currently the General Manager of High Tech, where he's grown the business 300% by enabling high-tech companies to more effectively transact with over 10,000 channels. Prior to joining Model N, Hanan was founder and CEO of Privia, still the standard for government contracting, where he worked with top 20 government contractors, including Boeing and Lockheed. Prior to that, Hanan spent 7 years as CEO of Click Online, a developer of multimedia products for high-tech leaders, including HP, IBM, and Microsoft, where, in 1994, he developed and deployed an interactive TV prototype for IBM in an NFL interactive yearbook with Pat Summerall. All of the phones are on listen-only mode, and later there will be a question and answer session with instructions being given at that time. You may also ask a question at any time using the chat window located in the control panel. Chat questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Today's session is being recorded, and you will be provided a copy of today's materials following the call. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Hanan. Take it away.
Thank you, Jackie. Let me just share my screen. Excellent. Thank you very much for that introduction, Jackie, and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate you investing your time, and we hope that you will find the presentation rewarding and informative. The agenda that we've prepared for today includes covering a brief overview of how we define digital transformation. Digital transformation is perceived somewhat differently by different groups, so we thought it would be good to create a common baseline, and then talk a little about why should we care, why is this important to our organizations, and why does it matter now. We'll then delve into more detail on how digital transformation is impacting channel business and channel operations, and we'll try to give some very specific examples there, and talk about what are the key challenges companies face when they try and drive digital transformation projects in their company. And then we'll proceed with some ideas of how you can start that internal educational process in your organization if you are going down the digital transformation path. And we will conclude with a Q&A session, which we do encourage you to send in questions via the chat window that you have, and we will try and address as many of the questions as we can at the end. Before we delve into all the content that we have here, I should perhaps give just a minute or a minute and a half of a background about our credentials in this space. So I will promise to keep this very brief. Model N is an 18-year-old company based in Silicon Valley. We're a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange, operating from 11 global locations. We have two main business practices focusing on high-tech and manufacturing and in life sciences. In certain sub-segments, we've achieved a fairly strong leadership position where we serve 25 of the top 25 global pharmaceutical companies, as well as 12 of the top 20 semiconductor companies globally. Overall, we serve over 170 companies in this space. So that's just a high-level overview, and just from the obligatory logo slide, you can get a sense of the various brands that Model N serves. I think the most important thing to take away from this one slide, other than this is a good sampling of many different logos, is the fact that if you look closely at the variety of companies here, whether it's companies in the medical device space or companies in the software space, in the solar space, semiconductor components, pharmaceutical, etc., there is virtually no product line that we, in these industries, that we haven't in one way or another interacted with and served. And so over 18 years, we've built a fairly good understanding of how life sciences and high-tech and manufacturing companies operate especially through their channels. And speaking specifically of the channel offering the Model N brings to the market, Model N offers a true integrated end-to-end platform that includes channel data management, which is an acquisition we did a few years ago of a company called Channel Insights that some of you may be familiar with. That has been completely integrated into the rest of our platform, funneling near real-time data collection and cleansing with 24-hour turnaround times into incentive management solutions like rebate management and co-op and MDF funds, as well as an underlying architecture to handle channel inventory and price protection and other components that go along with channel business. So that's the end of my little pitch. Just a little context for those of you who might not be familiar with Model N about what we do in this space. So with that, let's jump into the high-level introduction into the digital transformation. And if there's one thing that we really want you to take away from today's event is to remember these things. Customer centricity is at the heart of digital transformation, and we'll talk more about why that is the critical factor that's driving many of the initiatives that we see across many companies. It will impact in a very real way the fortunes of the leading brands in the world today, and we'll touch more about that in a minute. Over 50% of companies that were surveyed by Forrester in 2017 have funded initiatives for 2018, mostly sponsored by the C-suite in the organization. So this is something which is getting the attention of the top executives in organizations and is being driven down with, frankly, one of the highest levels of activities that we see almost in any other space. And the changes are happening now. So it's very relevant, and we believe that this will pick up steam in 2018 and in 2019. So it's a very appropriate time for organizations to re-examine how they're approaching this and what they can do to catch up with some of their competitors. Why should we care about digital transformation? And we'll touch on this point a couple of times during today's presentation. We're starting this with this brief quote here from John Chambers from last year in 2017. As many as 40% of the businesses will fail in the next 10 years. 70% of them are attempting to do digital transformation right now, but only 30% will succeed. And if you're not worried about that, then you should be. That was his message. And if it sounds too fantastic or just too dire of a prediction, here's another way of putting that same idea into context. In the last 17 plus years, over 50% of Fortune 500 companies have either been acquired, merged, or have declared bankruptcy with no end in sight. And this quote comes from last month's McKinsey's quarterly review. It's easy for us to sometimes miss the big picture. And only with hindsight, people go back and look and say that was the pivotal moment that we didn't move along with the way our customers were buying and somehow missed the market. If you think of companies like Kodak, who, for a long time reigned supreme and thought that they were in the paper and chemical business, and even though back in the 1970s they had a prototype of digital cameras, they didn't believe that customers would be going down that path. And when they woke up in the 90s, it was too late. And so I think it's really important to understand that we generally believe, as do many of the market leaders, that this is going to be pivotal for many B2C, many B2B companies in the coming years. We spoke about customer centricity being at the heart of digital transformation, and let's explain why that is. If you think about the new generation of decision makers that are showing up today in the B2B environment, conducting business between corporation to corporation, they are more and more expecting to have the same experiences that they have when they conduct B2C transactions. They don't have the patience or the tolerance to accept a poor performance. And so what they're doing is they're getting self-educated online. They are even moving their decisions to online processes. And companies facing that have to move from a point of putting up information about their product and about their service purely and focus more about what is the customer journey to get educated and make a decision and eventually buy. And that's going to impact many marketing and sales processes, and invariably has to also impact how we engage with the channels, which is where we'll be focusing on in a few slides. It's interesting to note, you can see here another quote here on the right-hand side from IDC, that this process is also going internally into the company, all the way down into new product introduction. The IDC prediction here is that as much as 50% of manufacturers will be collaborating directly with their customers, in other words, directly with the end customers, to incorporate their input into product design and new product introduction. So this is truly, an end-to-end solution. Our focus here today is going to be on the sales and marketing side of things, and particularly the side of channels. But digital transformation really crosses many boundaries inside the organization. Some companies tend to take what I believe is a bit of a simplistic view on digital transformation. And because the word digital indicates that some technology will be involved, and we're looking at integrating, the web experience and social, media and mobility and customer service components, they all seem to feel like we're basically just integrating systems. We're doing the same thing, but just better integrated. And so it sometimes feels like it's simply an IT project. And I think that in some cases, companies are missing the boat about making sure that what they're doing from a technology standpoint actually aligns with the customer journey and buying process. So again, going back to why should we care? Customers interact, when they want to and where they want to, and companies need to be able to support that process, both from a data perspective as well as a transactional perspective, in all of their platforms and through all of their channels. And that is something that is really important and why we should really care about this. The experience that B2B has, where sometimes a customer needs to call to get information, or call to get the status of where an order is standing or a quote is standing, is simply not going to be acceptable. They expect the Amazon experience, or better, frankly. And failure to be responsive to these changes and the speed in which new business is being conducted is going to cost companies between 10 to 20% of revenue, impacting both market share and margins. And this is based on the analysis and survey that was released back in November, 2 months ago, by Forrester. But it also mirrors our experience in the last 18 years supporting a very wide variety of companies, and especially those whose solutions are more commoditized, where there are alternatives to go to. There is a direct linear correlation between the speed in which you conduct your business, and that means availability of information and ability to transact, and how much business is closing. The longer it takes, the more chance competitors get to grab that business. In proprietary solutions and even sole source solutions, some companies get a bit of a pass. They may go a little longer without too much of an impact, but even that has its limits. So again, the key comments about what I said earlier on is your company really fully engaged in the change that is happening now? And here's a few data points to support the fact that these changes are in fact taking place right now. 68% of global sales leaders say that focusing on the customer experience is one of their top priorities. 50% of the same companies that were in that same survey, it's about close to 600 companies that were surveyed by Forrester, said that they were not only had budgets, but were increasing their budgets for investments in sales and marketing tools in 2018 in the context of digital transformation. And a separate survey conducted last year by Altimeter said that 70% of these initiatives are actually driven by the CIO, CMO, and even CEO. So this is really, as I said earlier, a really top-down driven initiative. And with that, before we continue, we'd like to do a quick poll of the people in the audience today and ask, is your company today planning to invest in tools, whether it's in channel data management or rebate management, quoting, pricing, CPQ, in the next 12 months? And Jackie will join us for a minute just to explain how to respond to this poll.
The poll is being distributed, so if you don't mind clicking your answers, give it a couple seconds.
Okay.
Alrighty, so as of right now, we have 75% channel data management, 31% rebates management, 38% quoting, 31% pricing, and 69% CPQ.
Interesting. So, first of all, thank you for that quick turnaround and feedback. That was actually quite excellent. So, if I recall correctly, the numbers we heard that channel data management was the leading area where companies were focusing on. As much as 75% of the people on this webinar are looking at making such investments. I think the follow-up to that was CPQ with about 69%, and then the rest of the components, rebates, I think had about 31%. That is actually quite consistent with what we're seeing in the marketplace, and I think that especially the combination of channel data management and CPQ tie closely to some of the processes we'll talk about very shortly when we go into how all of this is impacting the channel business. But primarily, I think that the speed of conducting business ties very closely to both these types of initiatives. As I said earlier on, the digital transformation is going to impact almost any process you can think of in the organization. We spoke about even internally new product introduction. When I look at it from an external sales and marketing standpoint, when we look at marketing automation, online and social marketing, actually focusing on targeting end customers, the CRM user experience, which really needs to really be uplifted, mobility tools, quoting and pricing, incentives, recruiting channels and enablement. Actually, we're looking at some channels need to change, and we're seeing some organic change in specialization in certain channels, which we'll talk about in a minute. Getting intelligence or analytics into sales and marketing, and how we handle the data feeds, speed and accuracy, which I'll talk about in a minute. We're not going to be able to cover all of these aspects in a single webinar, but what we're going to try and focus on is some key areas that are mostly focused on the channel and how specifically these impact channel and channel operations with digital transformation. So as I go through the next 2 or 3 slides, we're going to try and hit on as many points as possible, and where appropriate, I'll try and bring some very specific examples so you can take, really bring the message home. Starting with more data is going to be exchanged with the channels, and there's fundamentally a bunch of reasons why that is happening. There's one element of simply the speed in which business is expected to be conducted, where we're seeing companies driving from monthly data exchanges down to weekly data exchanges and even more, and that alone increases the volumes. But also we see more demands on how not only point of sale data is changing hands, but also inventory, the quoting cycles, self-serving capabilities are all tying up in here, and overall systems are going to have to be able to support a significantly higher volume of data that is being exchanged. We're seeing a lot more automation around how companies are going to handle incentives. Some companies still operate on a program that, if a channel meets the criteria, then they submit some sort of a claim and get paid a rebate. Again, in the context of speed and ease of doing business with the channels and the seamlessness of the experience, the channels expect in this transformation context, they expect that if I hit my criteria, I just want to get paid. Just come in my check. If I got something wrong, we'll adjudicate and discuss it. But ultimately, if everything checks out, just pay the check. Why bother with a claiming process? So we're seeing more and more companies moving from claim processing to claimless processes. The introduction of digital proof for performance to approve MDF payments. Again, the MDF and management of market development funds is always a bit of a tricky issue, and a lot of companies, when you go outside the channel organization, they get very suspicious about why we're paying these funds out, and there's a lot of scrutiny around, do we really have measurable components here? But again, regardless of how companies feel, the expectation and the speed of which changes are happening in the channel, things need to move to the next level of accepting digital proof to allow the processing of MDF. There is going to be much deeper granularity of the data, which again, by the way, in turn will drive more data consumption. Companies are moving from account level information down to location-based information. So if you have an end customer that is being served by one of your channels, and the channel simply is reporting the POS and inventory, or POS that's associated with that particular account, many companies, as much as 50% of them already today, are telling us that is not nearly enough granular to what we want to know. We want to know where this is being consumed. We want to know it down at the branch level, down to the locale. Even if you have multiple locations in the same city, they want it broken down by that, because they want to understand where the demand is really coming from, because that's going to tie back to the marketing automation and the marketing investments they make. Also impacting some elements of compensation and payouts. So as many as 50 companies are now demanding, account level information. Not good enough. We want to go down to location by branch, even if it includes multiple locations in the same city. We're seeing D-level payments with shorter payment cycles. So instead of just looking at high-level attainment goals, where companies are saying, well, if you hit a certain milestone, you sold $1 million of our product, we're going to pay you 2% as a rebate. That is simply not cutting it. Between 30 to 40% of companies today, and we see that trend increasing, are coming back and saying, we want to know, in the context of this particular deal, are you really eligible for this incentive? Because we're going to look at much more granular data on the profitability of the business. We want to know that if this deal included a certain level of discounting, we may want to exclude that from the calculation of payouts. And that's why a lot of companies, on the one hand, want to be able to do this very quickly and pay accurately to their channels, and with 1 week turnaround times, or at the most a month turnaround time. But they want to be able to also be more granular in the control they have, and therefore the deal level control is really, really important. Again, we're going to continue with more impacts on the channel from digital transformation initiatives. But we're going to take another quick break here and ask the audience here for another quick survey. Are you collecting channel data yourself, or are you using external agencies to handle that process? And there are different options here. One is we invest, company resources only. It's entirely in-house. Or we invest company resources, but we also have somebody external helping us to collect and cleanse all the data. Or we just outsource it for an external agency. And other options here is we're not collecting it, but we want to, or it's not relevant to us, we're not doing it. So again, I'll hand this over back to Jackie to just open up the poll and allow you all to respond.
We'll give it a couple seconds again. Alrighty, so it looks like we have 50% for both of them as the We Invest company resource only, no external help, and then also We Invest company resource and only have external agency help. So it's going up a little bit, but it mostly is around the same scores. Yeah.
Okay, so I think just quick takeaway from that input is it's not surprising, but gratifying to hear that nobody thinks it's not relevant to their business. So that's a good thing. The other thing is we do see that trend in the marketplace. It actually has improved over the last few years. We've seen companies, maybe 3 years ago, it was still about 80% who were doing it entirely in-house, and just trying to make do with a group of people in a low-cost location doing a lot of fancy work with Excel spreadsheets or Access databases, trying to collect the data with EDI feeds and then also cleanse it and bring it up to a high level. And only about 20%, about 3 years ago, were actually involving external agencies to help them in the process and actually holding them accountable to various SLAs, both in terms of speed and quality of data. The fact that that number now has gone up to about 50% based on this little poll is actually quite encouraging, both to see that the appreciation of how this fits into the downstream processes and the importance of the speed and the importance of the quality is being understood by the consumers of this data. So continuing down the path of the impact on channels, the accuracy of payments is obviously very important. Finance is obviously very passionate about that. But there's a more important aspect, which is tying it to revenue generation and performance. And companies are getting more granular in their definitions of programs and what is a successful program. They're stepping away from the situation where in the past they were willing to accept a situation where measuring the ROI of the channel was simply looking at how much did you put into the channel in terms of investment across all of your internal resources and programs and incentives, enablement, recruitment, and all those investments, and then simply looked at, what was the output of the channel in terms of revenue and margin and did that analysis. Most companies today, the overwhelming majority, are moving to a point where they want to understand which programs are generating desired business results and which ones are not, so they can stop doing those and do more of the others. And they want to hold the channel accountable to performance, whether it is volume or value or quarter-over-quarter growth, or if it's penetration into specific market segments. There's various ways companies set up these programs, but tying it to performance is becoming incredibly important. Reducing the use of discount rebates or SPA debits, as some people call it, in favor of performance rebates kind of ties into that trend. A lot of companies still practice, and sometimes it's not going to go away. There's a need to enable channels to sell at a broken price, and there's a need also to, by the way, service that in a very quick way to enable them to capture market share and close business. However, wherever companies can, they're trying to move away from these upfront discounts on broken prices they give their channels and claims or rebates that they pay at the end of that, more towards performance rebates, where when you're paying, you know exactly what you're paying for. So that's another trend that we're seeing. Predictive analytics is becoming really important. It's helping drive pricing and incentive decisions, trying to determine based on analytics which programs are actually generating results and moving the needle and which ones are not. What pricing changes are actually going to get more market share and still deliver the margins that we want and not. And analytics is becoming a very important part of this. I can tell you that right now, without mentioning specific names, Model N is involved in a very large project that is actually combining quoting and rebating into the channel in a very large $50 billion high-tech company, and another one around a $15 billion company. And in both companies, analytics is a big driver. It was, in fact, the entire ROI of the project was hinged on the ability to not only do these transactions effectively and quickly and self-serve and all the other components, but the ability to analyze them in real time and drive decisions in real time based on this analysis information was critical for many of these companies. We believe that, we kind of mentioned it before, but digital transformation will enable more data to be exchanged, whether we're using it for digital marketing data to support MDFs or other scenarios. We are also looking at how partners are being evaluated on profitable growth and revenue generation at the deal level using various revenue management tools. Again, the channel is so important, especially in high tech, where some companies will have as much as 70%. I've seen companies as much as 90% of their business going through the channel. There is a lot of scrutiny now going into the quality of that revenue and focusing on the right tools that enable it. And as you're inserting such solutions and such tools, you still need to support the channel buying process and the ability of that channel to support the customer. So it can't be disruptive. It can't be something that slows the business down. It needs to be in support of the digital transformation. AI and machine learning is going to be used to improve data quality and predictive analytics, and especially in this next bullet, looking at the propensity to sell of the channel and the propensity to buy of the end customer, actually using analytics to help companies better align their channels with the end markets they're serving, obviously from a geo standpoint, but also from specific end markets. If you're selling into, I'm just going to throw out an example, into automotive versus into medical device, your choices of channel are going to be more refined. And that's going to impact also the process of recruiting new channels and enabling these new channels. So this ongoing, rather than a post-mortem analysis at the end of a year. Companies are doing this now on a quarterly basis, evaluating their channels and realigning product lines and channels with the right customers, because they now better understand the customer buying process and they want to connect the right channel that can support that there. Turnaround times, I mentioned this a few times, they are getting extremely fast. We've seen, again, specific examples, companies who are moving from days or sometimes, longer than that, down to hours. We've seen specific companies, another company that we've worked with now for the last 10 years plus. It's a $15 billion company in a slightly different space. They have a goal of 80% of all transactions being conducted in less than 4 hours through their channels. And that is inclusive of a special price request. So they're not bringing it down to zero. There's still a certain amount of deals, big ones, important ones that require scrutiny and review, but they have built enough automation around the pricing algorithms as well as the ability to self-serve into the channel that allows them to take as much as 80% of their business and have a channel go in, get a price, put in an escalation or ask for a better price, and have it resolved all in a matter of minutes as you would interact with an Amazon. And this is a $15 billion B2B player operating with close to 50 different channels, very large ones, known ones, and it's all virtually entirely automated. Those who don't go down this automation path and self-service capabilities will fall behind. And again, I'm sort of using the word perish here in the context of what we said at the beginning of the presentation. At some point, this is going to be either leveling the playing field or creating a real differentiator for those who are doing it and the ones who are falling behind. Data collection from partners will move to near real time. And again, using some specific examples, we've been serving through the Channel Insight solution that we acquired. We've been serving dozens of very large high-tech and manufacturing companies, and most of them were very happy to move from 90-day cycles of getting their POS and inventory down to a month, or more recently in the last 2-3 years down to 1 week, and having a very clean turnaround time, and everyone was quite happy with it until about a year ago. And in the last year, we're seeing some of the biggest players in this space, we're talking about massive companies, moving to wanting to get daily reports. They may still want it on a weekly cadence, but they want to see the daily movements of inventory and POS. And a few of them are actually going, those who are closer to consumer electronics, are going down to literally daily reviews of POS and inventory. And when you think about the mechanisms that the organization has, the processes internally, the intel resources, and the external agencies that you might be using, they need to be able to support that, if not now, then in the very near future, because that is the trend that the industry is going towards. Claims, as I said earlier on, are going away in favor of transactional payments. So when attainments are hit, the check gets cut. There's no need for a lot of interaction and more claiming processes. It's not viewed as a value add. And there is a lot of consolidation going on. If in the past we've seen companies invest in some pricing or pricing analytics solution and a quoting solution or a CPQ solution to serve the channels, and then on top of that they had something to manage their market development funds and something else to manage their rebates, and yet something else that was collecting and cleansing their data, we're seeing single source of truth, single platform solutions being deployed with Model N, and some of our competitors are really going down this path of you should be able to do the end-to-end story. And it's not just a matter of efficiency. It's not just a matter of consolidating IT costs or even getting faster visibility of the data. It actually introduces capabilities that from a business perspective were not available before. And case in point is we see companies actually integrating their quoting and rebate processes, and we see that in some of our largest customers. And initially, that sounds like a strange concept, because quoting is considered to be part of the negotiation with a channel or with a customer, and it's more of a sales or sales operations function with a deal desk maybe. And then incentives tends to be more part of what channel sales might be responsible for, and it's more of a channel function and maybe a finance function handling that process. But the problem that when you have that disconnect is that you are actually not optimizing the revenue of the channel. And some of our largest customers today, when they interact with their channels, when they're negotiating a quote based on that product line, based on the particular channel, inside the quote UI, they can also see the rebate programs that channel is entitled to and what the true net margin of this deal is going to be. So if they approve this discount, the compounded impact of a discount or a SPA debit along with a performance rebate is going to be X. And that allows them in real time, rather than post-mortem analysis, to make better decisions on those channel pricing and rebating decisions. So that's a big driver for why we're seeing a lot of that integration, as well, of course, as bringing in the data and cleansing it into the processing of those processes. So we definitely believe, and we're seeing that momentum. Other companies are doing it through acquisitions and coming together. We did our acquisition a few years ago and integrated everything onto one platform. We're definitely seeing the suites taking the leading position rather than point solutions that might be very good, but they only deliver a very narrow thread of value and don't integrate into the overall digital transformation that you're trying to do with your channels. What are the challenges that companies face typically when they try and initiate any size of these projects? The first thing goes back to what I said earlier on. When it's viewed as an IT project, it's viewed as the new shiny toy. We're doing digital transformation and we're going to integrate a couple of systems. And it's viewed rather as a cost center and a short-term project rather than a long-term strategy that is linked to how you're going to drive more revenue and improve margins. And I think that's just philosophically a problem that some companies have going into these projects. The second thing is that many leaders, in other words, the executives in many companies, they're not completely aligned. They're not still bought into the idea that their customers, their end customers that are being served through their channels, are actually ready to move or want to move to the B2C experience, which is fast and self-educated and mobile and all those other characteristics that we said earlier on. So some of them are simply not bought into it, and they tend to be blockers of this change. And then there's the usual stuff of internal egos and politics, which can always slow down any project. And lastly, it's also knowledge. You may have somebody who's been responsible for, let's say, sales operations in a company, and they've been doing an exceptionally good job for the last 10 years, but then telling them that you want to convert their quoting center to an automated self-service center that is also linked to incentives. Sometimes they feel they're losing control. They haven't seen it before, so they don't understand it fully. They don't necessarily understand the customer buying journey or the channel buying journey. They're not ready to support that. And so that can also be a real stumbling block when people just don't get it. They don't see why this is important for the organization. So a few things to consider when you try and bring something like this into the organization. First, building executive sponsorship is critical. Getting the organization educated is really important. Really making sure that you understand your customer's buying process, because it has changed or it is changing. And before you embark on doing projects and trying to integrate systems and experiences, make sure that you're aligning it with really how they're buying. And you want to validate that you have the right channels. In other words, after you've understood your customer's buying process, you may discover that you have the wrong channels or some channels need to change. And because technology is still very important here, you obviously want to make sure that your CIO and the IT organization are ready to support the initiative. So we're getting close to the end of our presentation today, and I thought that it would be good to just leave you with some food for thought of how you can self-assess where you are in this market today, and so ask yourself a few things. Can you today get your channel point of sale data and your inventory data on a weekly and even daily basis? That's one question to ask yourself. Another one is that data at least 95% accurate? Because you will be driving marketing decisions, incentive payout decisions, sales incentive payout decisions based on this data. So it's important that it's as accurate as possible. Are you experiencing more than 3% errors in adjudication on sales and channel incentives? are your quoting and discounting and rebate solutions actually integrated through one system, or is it multiple separate disconnected systems? Are your deal turnaround times typically longer than a day? And can your channel self-serve on quotes and prices? And do more than 25 to 30% of your deals require human intervention to complete a transaction? Just an interesting data point for you. Last year, we had an interesting roundtable with PwC with a bunch of pricing leaders from a variety of high-tech Silicon Valley-based companies. And it was interesting to see how only about 20 or 30% of the audience would stood up in pride and say, you know, we only touch 20% or 30% of our quotes. Everything else is handled by machine. And the others were touching 80 to 90% of their quotes, which impacts quote turnaround time, not to mention operational costs and even accuracy of the pricing execution. So these are interesting things to think about. And if you're coming up with 2, 3, or 4 of these that are, well, we can't do this and we can't do that, it might be a good time for you to start looking at how the organization can get better educated about opportunities out there and explore, you know, go on your journey to explore how you can improve in some of these areas. The reasons that we believe digital transformation really drives huge promise for companies is it really is a great way to align the company and your channels with your customers' buying process. And the closer you're aligned with that, the better you will do. It's almost an obvious statement to make. Increasing your organization's responsiveness to deal opportunities, that will impact win rates to the tune of 10 to 20%, and it's supported by multiple surveys, including our own experience with our own customers. Better correlation of incentive programs with business results that you're trying to drive, as well as eliminating unnecessary overpayments. And some people think of digital transformation actually as an investment, as a cost center, when in fact, if it is truly a consolidated effort across multiple processes, in most places it actually produces operational savings. So for all those reasons, we think that digital transformation right now is a very exciting area that's happening. A lot of companies think they have bits and pieces of it, but when they try and look at a cohesive, complete end-to-end strategy, that's where we see people having, I guess, the largest challenges. And just before I sign off and hand this back to Jackie to take you into the Q&A session, if you're interested in learning more about digital transformation, just in a couple of weeks out, 3 weeks out, we have the Digital Reinvention themed session at Rainmaker. It's going to be in Carlsbad in Southern California. We have over 350 people from sales operations, channel, pricing, and IT professionals doing interactive sessions. Presenters there include people from Intel and AMD and Seagate and Qualcomm and many others. So if you're interested, feel free to join us, and there's a link there for you that you can use. So I hope that this presentation was useful for you and at least gave you some things to think about. With that, let me hand this back to Jackie.
Thank you, Hanan. We will now open for questions. If you'd like to ask a question, you may do so using the chat window located in the right-hand corner of your screen, or you can raise your hand using the Raise Your Hand button. We do have our first question. It is one of the big challenges for DT data, especially when data is coming in from many different sources?
Could you repeat that for me, Jackie?
Is one of the big challenges for DT data, especially when data is coming in from many different sources?
It is, and there's 2 reasons for that. The first one is that, especially when dealing with your channels, first of all, data will come in varying degrees of quality and in different formats. And so one of the challenges is you do need to provision a way of being able to support different data formats from your channels for both POS and inventory, and somehow unify to the format that you can use. And again, most solutions in this space do help you do that if you're using any external agencies. And the other piece is once the data is in the right format, the quality is inconsistent. So there is that enrichment process that you want to do, which again external agencies can help with, whether, there's Model N has competitors out there, and we definitely do it for many of our customers, is really trying to improve that quality of the data before it gets consumed. But there's a third element to that, which is when you go to the next level of looking at the analytics, your analytics is going to rely on significant other data sets. You might want to look at shipments and billing and quoting and contracts that might be in place and commitments that are committed there. And you want to be able to aggregate this information in a useful and meaningful way into your analytics platform. For example, if you want to show your sales organization, just how much POS is getting consumed against an opportunity. They might be managing an opportunity in your CRM system, and they have the opportunity inside CRM, but the POS might be sitting in a different system. And so for them to see inside CRM, for the salespeople or the people managing the channel, to see inside CRM, well, how much is really being consumed for this customer against that opportunity on this product line, it's definitely not out-of-the-box capabilities, and you want to marry different data sources and different data formats to do that. So it is a challenge, but I guess the good news is it's one that has been resolved by solutions that are available out there in the marketplace, Model N included.
And we have another question. It is, does the channel need to present configured products in either 3D CAD or 2D PDF format for purchase, inspection, and approval?
We're seeing both. It kind of depends on the product line that is being sold. But the whole visualization layer inside CPQ and in self-serve solutions for the channel inside CPQ do require, most of them are now requiring not only to see the either 2D or 3D configuration, they want to see that updating in real time. So they actually want to see, imagine a 3D solution that you're adding and removing parts to inside the CPQ solution. There are visualization layers that allow you to, allow the channel or even the end customer, by the way, go in and configure and see exactly in a 3D simulation what it is that they're configuring. So the differentiation between the 2D and the 3D is simply mostly dependent on what is the product line that is being sold.
Alrighty, and is there a specialized software for channel management activities?
So that's a great question. So if we're looking at quote-unquote task management, then frankly, I think that some solutions like Salesforce CRM probably have out-of-the-box enough to enable that sort of interaction with the channels using their community portal. However, if you're referring to activities that go deeper, for example, customer training or customer certification, and even customer recruitment, by the way, then I think that you'll find most CRM platforms to be a little deficient, and that there are better solutions out there that are focused on those type of activities and actually tracking, which customers have signed up, for training, which customers have, completed certification or renewed certification. They're actually dedicated solutions focused on those capabilities. When it comes around to more transactional activities, for example, which channels have signed up to the terms and conditions of a new rebate program, that is actually, out-of-the-box functionality for most solutions that provide, rebate capabilities. And I know a few of them, and I know that some of them offer this. I know that we do on our stack. So again, activities is a pretty broad term that it can range from just really task management, which CRM is good enough, all the way to transactional stuff or recruiting and enablement. And I don't think that there's a single platform out there that does it all, to be perfectly honest.
Alrighty, and ensuring compliance with program requirements is a big concern for organization. How is this area being addressed by Model N?
Sharing compliance in programs. So it kind of depends on the organization policy. I'll start with what we see in the marketplace, and I'll speak about Model N specifically. We have seen companies who actually firmly believe that by sharing compliance with specific channels. In other words, controlling security, not sharing it with all your channels, but by channel, channel by channel, giving them a portal in which they can see their slice of the business, how they're complying with with incentive programs, actually drives the right behavior you were hoping to get by introducing the program in the first place. For example, if you have a partner that is supposed to get a 2% rebate on a $1 million attainment, and I'm making this very, very, very simple because normally programs are a little more complex than this, but let's just keep it at this example. And if they went from 1 to 1.5 million, they now move to 3%. It behooves the channel to make the last week of the quarter effort of selling more or placing more orders just to cross that threshold and get the better rebate payout. And if that program was structured this way, that was your desired goal, you've actually successfully influenced their behavior. And so, we see companies that definitely go down that path and create those views. It's obviously not a shared view. They're not sharing all partners how they're doing. I mean, there are people who are thinking about leaderboards and things like that, but most of them do not do this. It really is on a one-to-one relationship with that particular channel. The channel logs into the portal, and they only see the slice of their data. There are those who feel that the channel should just discover at the end of the quarter how they did, and they don't share that information. In my experience, I've seen better results when that information is actually shared. Now, Model N, from Model N's perspective, sharing the compliance with either rebate programs or MDF programs, etc., is there. It's a capability that can be turned on. It has all the security layers in place to make sure that data never crosses between different channels. And it's a matter of company policy whether they want to turn on that capability or leave it hidden.
And we have another one. It is, how is fraud by channel partners being detected?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that for me?
How is fraud by channel partners being detected?
Oh, fraud. That's a lot of fun. So channels can be quite creative, and there are many ways of detecting it. One of the ways, and again, in this particular case, I'll have to revert to specifically my experiences here at Model N, because I don't really know how other vendors do this particular angle. But there's a lot of tools in place to handle this, starting with the basic aspect of inventory. We track inventory at multiple levels. We look at the inventory that was shipped. We know what was shipped out because we get that information from ERP. We looked at the POS data, basically what was sold out, and therefore you have an automated calculated quantity on hand of how much inventory that channel should have in the first place. Then you go in and you start looking at the reported inventory. The moment there is a discrepancy between reported inventory and calculated quantity on hand inventory, red flags should start going up, because where did this additional inventory show up? Some inventory might still be in transit, so there's some thresholds and levels of sensitivity that you can send, but the moment that the discrepancy is big enough, you have to start asking questions. And that's one of the elements that Model N helps expose. Another element goes to the SPA debit, or in semiconductor it's called the ship and debit process, where channels are selling at a broken price to a specific customer. And number one, we track the debits that are created, meaning that we identify a specific debit record with a specific product and a specific customer in a specific time frame associated to a specific bucket of inventory. So that if the POS fails to support the matching of the customer or the price or the debit expiration dates, or, for example, the value of inventory at that time where their credit claim is mismatched, all those get flagged and blocked. So that's just purely from a simple, transactional standpoint. There are other aspects. We're looking at companies looking into serialization and actually, going down to the next level of data, actually associating specific serial numbers down to products, even in components. We're seeing that as well. And in our channel data management solution, we also track those as well. So we provide a lot of visibility. There is so catching situations of gray market and inventory that came from a different place, therefore not eligible for price protection, not eligible for a credit claim against a SPA debit or even a rebate payout. Those are detectable. There are softer areas of let's call it bad behavior by channels where if they get exposed to an end customer price, if they actually have visibility to that, they can sometimes abuse that and start buying at that end customer price because it's a preferred price, regardless of who they're selling to. And there's the detection here is more after the fact, but it's pretty close to after the fact. Whether you're seeing an incredible amount of business being posted against this particular customer, and you can just validate, you'll see that in the report that is coming from the channel, and then you can just validate with that end customer, are you really buying all this new business? And if not, then you can hold the channel accountable. Or in some cases, companies simply mask the end customer price altogether. They never show the end customer price to the channel. They just give the specific price to the channel. The channel transacts, and then they need to identify who that end customer is, and the end customer is the one who's getting a rebate to guarantee them the end price that they were guaranteed. So there's many more areas. We just touched on inventory and gray market and bad behaviors around abusing end customer pricing. But there's other areas we can talk about. Those are just a few of the ones that we commonly see and address in our solution.
Okay, we have time for one more question. In one of your slides, you mentioned claimless processes and automated payments. Don't we lose control and automability?
Absolutely not. That's a very good question. So it's actually one of the first questions that we have to deal with when finance gets into the discussion. Finance. I've never seen an organization where finance was a fan of post-deal incentives, because it means that they need to defer revenue and they need to accrue liabilities and they need to trust the data so that they know they're accruing enough and they won't ever have to restate a revenue situation, that they know when to release cash and terminate liabilities, and that they're going to pay out accurately. So the audit trail is everything for the finance organization. And so the introduction of automated payments is the first thing that their ears go up and say, what does that mean? But the really nice thing is that in the solutions that Model N brings to the market, they actually get probably better audit trails than they ever had before. Number one, every time they create a rebate program, the liabilities that are created along with that program or an MDF program are automatically created. They can immediately see that, and they can adjust it based on past performance to see how much they want to accrue. The Model N system, which was designed to really handle very complex rebate scenarios. I'm just using that as an example because we've handled companies that have 1 billion transactions in a single year, and on each one of those transactions they had as many as 70 different validations. So we actually have an output that shows line by line, each POS line, which validations it met to get approved for a payout and which ones were rejected because it failed to meet certain criteria or was extracted because of certain terms and conditions of the rebate program, and that is done automatically. So they have an actual automated audit report that they can get out of the system on every POS line. We match, by the way, the POS lines against inventory, so we do additional validations there as well. And they can see everything that is being approved, everything is being rejected, with an explanation behind it on why. We even have some customers who actually use these reports as part of their SOX audit. They print out these reports, and it's part of their SOX auditing process. So there is actually great accountability and auditability that is provisioned there.
All righty, and that wraps up our questions today. Thank you, Hanan, for offering your time and sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending. Please take a few minutes to fill out our post-event survey. Your input is very important to us. This concludes today's conference. You may now disconnect.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Did you send out the posters?